is often first forgotten. Those are the people that really keep this university running. They are the secretaries and the assistants. They are the people that mow the lawns and water the grass. They're the people that clean toilets and bathrooms and windows. They are a part of the Stanford community, and their caring and concern has made this day possible as well. Please thank them. And finally, I want to thank the families. You are the ones that really made this day possible. Each and every graduate has someone tied to them by blood and or spirit who was there for them, who planted seeds in their spirit, who nurtured the ground on which they grew. You are responsible for them being here, and while they were here, you sent care packages, made phone calls, sent money. And that's perhaps what I want to talk about today. Family, not the money part. All us politicians are focused on more than just that. The family. Today is Father's Day, and I thought I would focus really on two men in my life. I am one of those guys that knows in my heart that women in this globe, philanthropists are finding this out. So many people are seeing that if you support women, that you will help change neighborhoods, change cities, change countries. And from a man who is part of the African American tradition, which is rich with matriarchal power and strength, please do not think that while focusing on men today that I do not understand that truth. But today, for a very specific reason, I want to focus on two men in my life who were at my graduation. And I know they would like to be here today, but for reasons I'll mention later, they could not make the trip. These two men are my dad and my grandfather. They taught me what it means to be a man. And they both are these outrageous spirits with the corniest jokes imaginable, and they would show up to my graduation, and both of them would be like a stereophonic bad joke-telling machine. As they would weigh into me, my grandfather, this huge, big man, would saddle up to me and say, "You see, boy, the tassel is worth the hassle." Yes, Granddad, yes. And then, of course, he would look through the program and say, "I see that you're not magna cum laude or summa cum laude, you're just thank you, Lottie, I'm out of here." My father would not be undone. He too was at every one of my graduations, and his jokes got more painful as the years went on. He and my mom would love to say, they'd look at me and they would whisper to another parent, and they would take the line and say, "You know, behind every successful child is an astonished parent." I really can't believe this. Unbelievable. My father got tired of graduations after a while. He's a guy that went to college and then went to work, and he saw me graduate from Stanford once, graduate from Stanford twice, then go to England and study and get another degree, then go to law school, and finally he said at my last graduation, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July. And you ain't hot. Get a job." I want to pick up on these two incredibly corny men and really get to their two specific lessons that they imparted to me on graduation. My dad would touch me almost like he was trying to feel my very spirit. He would look at me and he would say in ways that are eloquent, he would impart to me this truth. He would say to me, "Boy, you need to understand that who you are now, you are the physical manifestation of a conspiracy of love. The people whose names you don't even know, who struggled for you, who fought for you, who sweat for you, who volunteered for you, you are here because of them. Do not forget that." My father said those words on a graduation day, and he knew that I would not forget that, because this was his consistent theme to me all of my life. He wanted me to know where I came from. Now, my father, in his own charismatic way, would always talk about his own journey being one that was a result of a conspiracy of love. And I listened to those stories year after year. By the time I was 40, I would start arguing with him because the scenes would get so much more dramatic with time and change. And I'd be like, Dad, I can't believe this. You were born a poor boy. He goes, poor? I wasn't poor. Shut up, man. I said, Dad. He goes, no, I wasn't poor. I was just P.O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. Don't exaggerate my material well-being, son. I'd have to argue with him and try to convince him that he was not telling the full truth when the weather patterns began to shift over the years from, rainy in the mountains of North Carolina, then the thunderstorm started, then the hail period began, where it went from hail the size of golf balls, then footballs, then soccer balls, then small Cadillacs. This last year I argued with him because he tried to tell me, and I couldn't accept it. I had to be respectful of my dad, but I could not accept it. There's no way, Dad. You were in the mountains of North Carolina. You could not have had a tsunami in your childhood. But as much as my dad seemed to exaggerate aspects of his childhood over the years, the truth is he was born very poor. He was born to a single mother who could not take care of him. He then was raised by his grandparents, like many children in my community, but then his grandma could not take care of him. And then he was out in the community, but it was that conspiracy of love, people whose names I do not know, in a small, segregated North Carolina town that rallied around this boy, would not let him fail, got him to school, put a roof over his head, put food on the table, taught him discipline and respect, and he made his way. And then when it was time for him to graduate high school, he was not going to go to college. He thought his destiny was to go to work, get a job, but it was that conspiracy of love that would not let him turn his back on higher education. I couldn't believe it this last Thanksgiving as my family was going around talking about what we were thankful for. Here is my father that begins to cry because he could not remember all of those people in the town. He could not say their names who put dollar bills in envelopes so that he could afford his first semester's tuition at North Carolina Central University and then get a job and stay in school. But they are a part of that conspiracy of love. And then in college, my mom and dad would not let me forget the truth of that time. It was the early 60s, and I had this privilege last year of being the commencement speaker for my mom's university, Fisk University, on her 50th reunion, and she reminded me about what happened at her university. As the night before dinner, she took me around to table after table, stopping and saying, Corey, this is the young lady that led our voter registration movement at a time that it was dangerous in the South to go out and register people to vote. You all remember Goodwin and Cheney and Schwerner. She would take me to another table and say, this is the young lady that led our boycott of the downtown store that would not serve African Americans. At every table was almost like she was talking to me again as a boy, snapping her fingers and saying, pay attention. This person marched for you. This person protested for you. This person sacrificed and risked expulsion for you. The conspiracy continued. My parents would tell me about landing in Washington, D.C. That's where they met. 2 college graduates, African Americans, that confronted the reality that many companies would not hire blacks. But it was this conspiracy of love. Black folks and white folks and Latinos in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in America that were forming organizations that were challenging companies and working with them to hire blacks. My dad soon became one of the first blacks hired by an oil company, then one of the first black professionals hired by a department store. Then he and my mom became a part of a wave of the first blacks hired from this small tech startup you all out here in Silicon Valley may not have heard of called IBM. The conspiracy continued. When my parents got promotions after doing so well at IBM, they got moved to Washington, to the New York City area. They were looking for towns to move into and immediately found out that many of the nicest towns with the best schools would not show the homes to black families. And so my parents worked with this group of conspirators who formed something called the Fair Housing Council. And every time my parents would go look at a house and were told it was sold, they would send a white couple there to see if that was the truth. I was told that white couple's name was Mr. and Mrs. Brown, but they were not brown. My parents fell in love with a home. They were told it was sold. The Browns were there next, told it was still for sale. They put a bid on the house. On the day of the closing, my father went, instead of the Browns, with a young lawyer whose name I don't know, walked into the real estate agent's office and said, "You are in violation of New Jersey fair housing law." And before he could finish his speech, this young lawyer, bright and ready to confront injustice, the real estate agent stands up and punches the lawyer in the face. He sigs a dog on my dad. Now, the size of the dog has changed over the years.